Hey, I think we're out of commercial. Well, I got two different ads running on my dashboard in the channel. I keep both open just to monitor stream quality. But I think we're good now. I think we are good now. So, hello everyone. My name is Clayton, and this is the Fantasy Football Show, where we talk about fantasy football in the aspect of how it's similar to other strategy games, other gaming simulations, where we compare analysis, we use analysis, and we try to put some extra thought into how we decide our matchups and how we play fantasy football. So the Friday show usually takes kind of, a very simplistic form, question and answers. I actually haven't been at the Friday show for a couple. Well, the Friday show hasn't taken place for a couple of days. So usually what we start with is the recap of the Thursday night game. And this week it was the Falcons versus the Saints. One of the things that was interesting in this game, other than a very good fantasy performance again from Devontae Freeman, Mark Ingram having a decent night, and Benjamin Watson being kind of like the breakout player for the Saints in this game. The only thing that was kind of unique this week was the fact again that we had a Saints win against a previously undefeated Falcons team. And I think it showed a lot of the flaws that we all have seen in the Falcons' defense. They're not a top caliber defense, but they have a really good offense. However, the Saints were able to pressure Matt Ryan, able to disrupt him, able to hurry him. And Julio Jones was a factor. He had 93 receiving yards, which is good enough for 9.3 fantasy points. But no touchdowns, nothing really deep, no really huge plays. The Saints defense got a fumble recovery, two fumble recoveries, no interceptions, but also a blocked kick for a touchdown. So they even their defense showed some fantasy utility. Previously, a defense that had been suffering and unowned virtually in every fantasy league I've seen. So you had a very interesting game last night. And from a fantasy perspective, I guess what we can take going forward is even Matt Ryan's bad games aren't that bad. 18.8 fantasy points. He still outdid Drew Brees in terms of fantasy points. Drew Brees only had one touchdown in this game, so you're looking at Matt Ryan as again still a very consistent starter. He ended up finding Roddy White for one of the touchdowns, so he's just so consistent at this point that he almost becomes a must start to me every week. Even in weeks like this where the team was not moving the ball really, really well, a struggling week, he's got this ability to get enough for me to consider him an every week starter. Another thing that I was interested in, it was Benjamin Watson kind of filling that Jimmy Graham role. A lot of people, including some people in one of my leagues, thought that Josh Hill would probably take over in terms of the pass-catching tight end for the Saints. But really, it's been Benjamin Watson, at least for this game. The Saints have not been able to put up anything really consistently. Like, even though Mark Ingram had a good fantasy day, 17.6 fantasy points, he struggled to gain yards. He's probably some people's RB1, but if you're in that position, you're probably going to struggle more weeks than not. I think this week the Saints were lucky to come against a weak defense, but that's been few and far between in terms of good games for Mark Ingram. Mark Ingram is a running back who was never broken 1,000 yards rushing in a season in his entire career. He's never gotten 10 touchdowns. He's not an RB1. He's not a running back who has lived up to his round one draft status. And this is a Saints team that's kind of built not around him, but built to see him flourish. They've traded for linemen. They've gotten rid of some of their more, attractive weapons. Kenny Stills, Jimmy Graham. I mean, when you're talking about their threats, their open field, their down the field threats, a lot of those are lost. And Colston was out last night with an injury to his shoulder. So a lot of those Colston Coleman passes end up going to Benjamin Watson. And Mark Ingram is a back who, in a good situation in New Orleans, can't really take advantage. So I again don't think Mark Ingram is going to be. If you have Mark Ingram, this might be the week to try to bundle him in a trade to get something better. I think Mark Ingram, and you could package him with a wide receiver and kind of attract, a mid-tier wide receiver one. Maybe somebody like Brandon Marshall, who people, assume has, just gotten off to a hard start and the season will cool down. I don't think that's the case. I think Brandon Marshall is the go-to guy in the Jets offense, and with Ryan Fitzpatrick throwing the ball instead of Geno Smith, you're looking at a quarterback who's willing to take risk. It shows in Ryan Fitzpatrick's interception totals, but at the same time, that means just more opportunities for Brandon Marshall. The Jets play close games. They have a defense that can keep them in stuff, and they're usually not blowing teams out, which makes for really good competitive football for them, which means Brandon Marshall's going to get utilized a lot. I don't think Brandon Marshall's had a game this season under 12 points, so it's just he's a wide receiver to target, and I think somebody that you can package Mark Ingram with to get. So that might be an option for you. But yeah, the Thursday night game was very, very good, very entertaining, and from a fantasy perspective, just presented a lot of things that we can take and digest. Maybe Drew Brees, even in this game, was a good game for him. No turnovers, relatively clean pocket for him most of the night, but still only one touchdown, and that one touchdown was on a 4th and goal, like flip pass. So it's gonna be maybe difficult setting if you're a Breeze owner, but at the same time, there might be a little bit of hope, at least at home. The Saints played so much better this week in front of their home crowd, and that's kind of been their modus operandi for a few years. There was actually an interesting stat that they had last night, in that over the past, I think it was 10 games at the Dome, they have a losing record, actually, and that was very surprising, but it also is kind of emblematic of the current Saints problems. So we'll just kind of have to monitor that and see where that goes. But in my mind, it might be good things for Drew Brees and the Saints in the future. And you're going to see more of this pass controlling Brees, which might make for more yards. And hopefully he'll have better touchdown games, because I just don't see Mark Ingram continuing as a back who's going to get you 2 touchdowns a game. So I think that will end up going to either Coleman or possibly Cooks on some quick out kind of Wes Welker-ish-esque plays, instead of Ingram at the goal line all the time. But that is the Thursday night game, and it was just an interesting, to me, it was just an interesting and fun football contest. So let's now turn our attention to Sunday. And one thing that I wanted to do this week that's kind of new, it's new at least to this show, is to look at injury reports. Instead, like before, I would just show you kind of my lineup, what I was doing. And I think that was helpful, but it didn't really give you some kind of up-to-date information that you wouldn't be able to get elsewhere, or you wouldn't think to get. So injury reports, obviously these are going to be changing going into Sunday. But Friday, you usually, at least if we do it like, if I'm late like I am today, you'll have injury designations. So we can go through, we've got probable on T.Y. Hilton, which, he's going to play. Andrew Luck being questionable. he's trending towards probably playing in the game. But again, it's against the Pats. It's a game that the Colts don't necessarily need because of how weak their division is. So again, Andrew Luck's going to be a player you want to monitor. But we have probables on Blake Bortles, probables on Allen Hurns, questionable on T.J. Yeldon. But if you're in the position where you have to play T.J. Yeldon, that's not a great position to be in. Saying he's a game time decision. Didn't practice all week. It's probably my inclination he's not going to play. But Travis Kelce is probable. Mike Wallace is probable. Deion Lewis is questionable. Deion Lewis, I think the primary beneficiary of that is LeGarrette Blount. And I think the game situation of New England versus Indianapolis presents a Blount type game, a bigger back game, because their front seven isn't that strong. So you're not looking at utilizing, the quick back out of the backfield to counter a good front seven. So I think might be a game where Garrett Blount could have a very good game. Bill Belichick has been using these running backs actually in a way that's very un-Belichick-like. He usually tricks you. Bellatrix is the kind of the old, misnomer. That he, would play one running back. He'd have a great game, play another running back the other game. And that's mainly because of his game plan. He sticks to a game plan. But now he's down to basically two backs and uses them based on the game plan. And this week, it feels like a LeGarrette Blount week based on the Colts front seven. Then you look at Victor Cruz is going to be out again this week. Ruben Lando will play. Odell Beckham. These are all Monday night games this is a Monday night game for the Giants and Eagles. Odell Beckham is a do not practice. Probably going to have a questionable designation, so it's going to be a game time decision. My guess is he will play. But what this probably means for players who own Eli just means that I wouldn't expect a lot out of Eli this weekend. I would probably expect the Eagles to win, even as a Giants fan, just because of the injury situation that the Giants kind of have going, and the fact that the conference race is so tight. It doesn't make sense to throw Odell out there and, have him hurt himself further in a loss, and then have to later on in the season, because you're having, this is a game against Philadelphia in Philadelphia. It's a game it's a tough divisional road test. Eli's been traditionally very bad in Philadelphia in the last couple of years. I don't think he's thrown a touchdown since. Well, I was still in college. I was still in law school, so we were talking 3 years ago. I would definitely suggest maybe looking elsewhere at the quarterback position there. But if you're looking at Odell Beckham, my inclination is he will play. I don't know if that's a good thing, especially as a Giants fan. I don't know if that's a good thing. I know it's a good thing, for the game plan, but I don't know if it's a good thing to risk further injury to, clearly the most talented player on the offensive side of the ball for us. What I do think it means, though, is you'll have a heavy dose of heavy dose of Jennings. Because Jennings presents a good matchup for the Philly D. Philly has a strong linebacking core. And I think he's a rookie or second-year player. Linebacker has really stepped up. And his name is blanking on me for a second. Let me just quickly Google that. No, it's not Michael Kendricks. Kendricks is out. Giants, Eagles, depth chart. Here we go. Yeah, Jordan Hicks is the person I'm thinking about. He's been playing very well this season. And sorry it took so long for me to find that. It just would have bothered me if I didn't. Jordan Hicks is playing very well this season. He's an interesting player in that he has versatility. As you see, he's in the middle linebacking slot, but he has the coverage ability to cover backside of the backfield, and I think he'll be the one who the Giants have to worry about if they try to, really feed Shane Vereen like they did to secure the win against the 49ers. So I think that you're looking at a more Jennings game in terms of the running back position for the Giants. So Rashad Jennings, to me, is going to get a lot of carries. So I would say maybe 15 to 20 carries in the game, 80 yards, probably a touchdown. That would be my stat line. I think Shane Vereen is going to be utilized, but no more than 50 yards receiving. And, he almost never does anything on the ground rushing the ball. So that would be my prediction for him. He might be utilized in the red zone, but I don't see Eli throwing a touchdown pass. So it's going to have to either come from the defense. And with Prince Akamara also out for 2 to 4 weeks, it just seems like an uphill battle. And that's a game that I think we're going to look at later when we talk about some starts and games to look at players that you might not otherwise starting to give them a chance a week. I see a lot for the Eagles players because the Giants defense is so banged up. There's a lot of potential there. Eric Decker, Chris Ivory are playing. John Brown's playing. Ben Roethlisberger is out. I think that's not a surprise. He's still within the timetable of him and his recovery. Carlos Hyde is listed as questionable. But he's expected to play. Marshawn Lynch is a game time decision. It says now Pete Carroll expects him to play a lot. So Marshawn Lynch probably going to play. Again, questionables are always somebody you look at Sunday morning, but it gives you, right now, we actually can go through them and say, oh, he's more than likely going to play or not, and that helps us, if we have to add somebody today instead of Sunday when everybody's trying to add somebody last minute. Deshaun Jackson is game time decision. He went through individual drills, though, on Friday. So individual drills means he's gotten some work in. Potential to play, but Deshaun Jackson has always been, very iffy in the latter stages. We have one more page of players to go through. Andre Johnson will play, Aaron Foster, James Jones, Cobb all play. Theo Riddick, questionable, but he's not a player you would want to play anyway. Golden Tate will play, Peyton Manning will play, Odell will play. Demaryius Thomas, I didn't really know about this injury. He didn't practice, but he practiced Friday. Looked really good. He's ready to go. He'll play. Isaiah Crowell. He's been limited in practice all week. That's only interesting because of Duke Johnson. But either way, Denver is a bad matchup for the Cleveland Browns running back core, especially because there's a backfield by committee, and I see that game as being tough sledding for the Browns. I do have to play a couple Browns this week, but I just don't see it as a good game. The other player of note, LaShawn McCoy, will play. Is expected to play this Sunday. So if you have LaShawn McCoy, there you go. He's back after a long absence. Steve Smith probably won't play, so that means if you have Kamir Aiken, another week to roll him out, especially against a San Francisco defense that has been very, very weak. Very, very weak. Joe Flacco likes to throw the ball a lot. The Ravens running backs are also banged up. Justin Forsett is questionable. He practiced a bit on Friday, He said that he'll be a game time decision, but obviously, usually if he has a limited practice, there's a good chance he'll play. But still, the only other healthy running back on their roster is Javoris Allen, and I think he becomes a very good start just because of how poorly the 49ers defense is. They're a little bit stronger in their linebacking core than people give them credit for, mainly due to Navarro Bowman, but he's still not completely back, at least in my opinion and looking at the eye test. So that's kind of your injury report, and that goes through everybody that we've who's really impactful. These are all taken players in a 12-team league, so it gives you a good overview of who's in, who's out, where they stand going into Sunday, and hopefully that helps you with your lineups a little bit too. Potentially knowing who's in, who's out, or to add a player like Javoris Allen, who has the potential to sneakily help your team. I think that goes into talking about the schedule. This week we have a pretty interesting slate of games, but there's a lot of very good defensive matchups that hinder like some players that I normally would say are really good plays. For instance, you have the Steelers and Le'Veon Bell, Antonio Brown playing the Cardinals, a very good defense, great secondary, and Michael Vick still is the quarterback, so I see limited potential for some of those players. Now, that doesn't mean that you're not going to start them, but I think you should temper expectations a little bit. But there's a good matchup, I think, for the Jets against the Redskins. The Redskins defense has shown flashes, but is not a top-tier defense in any way, shape, or form. They have so many holes. Their secondary is... I think the running game might be a little bit slow, but obviously the Jets are going to stick with it. So you'll have, a good day for Chris Ivory. I think Brandon Marshall and Eric Decker are going to have very good days. Ryan Fitzpatrick is a sneaky start if you in need of a quarterback. The Bills play the Bengals. The Bengals are a rough matchup. Tyrod Taylor's probably out. And if he does play, he's going to not be at 100%. And the Bengals defense is very tough on running backs. So even if LeSean McCoy does play, he's likely to be the only weapon in the Buffalo backfield. And Percy Harvin's still questionable. Sammy Watkins, I believe, is out. So you're talking about a diminished Bills going against the Bengals. So the Bengals become a good defensive start. I was able to pick them up in a couple of my leagues because they're coming off a bye. And teams coming off a bye, especially defenses, have an extra week to plan. Extra week for the coaches to go over game film and look at their next opponent. And if E.J. Manuel is the starting quarterback, that's interceptions, that's fumbles. I'm seeing big points for the Bengals defense, and I'm starting them this week. The Broncos against the Browns. The Broncos defense has been so good, it's hard to play against them. But it's going to be an interesting matchup because you're butting Josh McCown, who's passed for over 350 yards in every game he's completed. So you're talking about huge numbers going against a defense that has been so far this season very resolute. So that's an interesting game just as a fan to watch. And an interesting game from a fantasy perspective to see how good is Josh McCown. Because if he can play not even 350 yards, if he can have a good fantasy day against the Broncos, he enters that. Not only, like for instance, he's not rostered in a lot of the leagues I'm in. So he enters in that interesting case of he's got to be a QB too. Like he's got to be a QB that's on somebody's roster. He's got to be rostered. And in a league where you've had so many quarterbacks disappoint this season or be injured, him not being rostered may come back to bite a lot of teams. Like, for instance, Tyrod Taylor wasn't rostered for a while. I picked him up and started him a couple weeks, and he's been just a godsend for my team. for a couple of my teams actually. Just really good points, even in bad games. Like he'll have 100 yards passing, but get you 76 yards rushing and a touchdown, and then throw a passing touchdown. It's a terrible looking stat line, but it becomes 20 plus fantasy points. That's Tyrod Taylor. He's amazing, and I've been preaching him all season long. But this week against the Bengals, banged up, I don't think he's gonna play. I don't think the Rex Ryan will put him out there in a bad situation with diminished weapons to throw to fail. I think putting EJ Manuel out there, EJ Manuel struggles. It kind of goes to show that Rex was right in going to Tyrod Taylor, gives Tyrod Taylor an extra week to heal. It makes all the sense in the world to bench him. You're in a decent place. The division is not really up for grabs because the Patriots are kind of running away with it, so you're playing for the wild card already in the back of your mind. So in my mind, I say don't risk a player who gets you into the playoffs against a team that's very very physical and has the reputation of being kind of dirty too. So yeah, I think that Tyrod sits this week, EJ Manuel starts, and because of that, the Bengals defense goes absolutely crazy. Let's see. Are there any other games? Chiefs Vikings is a game that I want to talk about very briefly, just because there's a player to watch. Charcandrick West. I'm probably pronouncing that wrong, but he is going to potentially be filling in for Jamal Charles, or whether it's Niles Davis is filling in for Jamal Charles. So it's going to be interesting to see who gets the majority of the carries, especially because the Minnesota Vikings are a pretty decent defense, pretty stout defense. I guess that happens when, especially against the run, and I guess that happens if you have to face Adrian Peterson all day in practice. But the Chiefs want to see where they're at against a team that's not elite. They lost last week to a team that wasn't elite, but I blame that a lot on the morale crusher that is seeing Jamal Charles, tear an ACL. They lost to the Bears, and it was, very close game, but I think a lot of that had to do with at what point the Bears caught them. If they caught them after Jamal Charles goes down to a season-ending injury for the second time, I want to say, second ACL tear. Just rough from a team perspective, and to see how the Chiefs rebound, that's going to be potentially very interesting. And really, that whole backfield committee situation in Kansas City is worth monitoring, and this is a good test because if West can do something or Davis can do something against this defense, that's a player you can ride for the rest of the season, or as long as he's healthy. Again, game to watch, game to keep your eye out for, and see what is really going on in Kansas City. Other than that, we talked about the injuries. I think that this is kind of a slow week, and obviously I'm kind of getting back into the Friday show, so people haven't been coming through the chat as often as they have in the past, but that's okay. I hope that if you see this, via VOD or on YouTube, that you'll come through. We do shows, and I'm back to the regular schedule on Tuesdays and Fridays, excuse me. And I will also be updating this page. I've said that for several weeks, but I actually did work on it this week. I just didn't, update my OBS so that I could broadcast with it. Just because I was running a little bit behind and wanted to do the show and not have to sit and finagle for like 15 minutes with, changing my scenes and overlays and stuff. But it will be here for the next Tuesday's show. And the Twitter is up. I will actually put it on the screen for you, just so that everybody can see it and see the Twitter handle. There we go. It's conscious thought. Um, is if what you want to search for here. I'll make it big enough so you guys can see it. But the Twitter handle is at TTV Twitch TV underscore conscious, and that is where I'll be. I'm gonna be promoting this a little bit more, and that's where we're gonna get a lot more fan questions and input, and then I'll read tweets on the show, and I think that's gonna be good for the fantasy football broadcast because you can get it out there, retweet it, have your friends follow the channel. I'll post all the links to the YouTube videos up there, so it's gonna be a way for you if we to really enhance the communication between myself and everybody who's come through the show, and I think that's gonna be great. And I really look forward to it, and hopefully it grows our little community. So for everybody out there watching or who will watch this at a later date, I really appreciate you, and I really thank you for sticking by me, especially because I've been all over the place recently. But thanks. I love you guys, and I will see you at the next show on Tuesday. Have a great weekend.